Grid tonight, we'll talk about the Indianapolis 500 and the capacity for fans attending. We'll also cover the Pocono race weekend, a triple header on Sunday and two cup races at the Tricky Triangle, and what the Bernie Eclestone said this past weekend, and a little bit more about Lewis Hamilton's new paint job right here on Grid tonight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grid Tonight on July 1st, 2020. My name is Kobe Lambert from the podiumfinish.net alongside Joe Samniego, and we begin with the news that came out today, and that is Go Fast Racing's new sponsor starting Sunday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So Patriots of America, a political action committee, has agreed to be the primary sponsor for Corey LaJoie and his number 32 Ford Mustang Go Fast Racing Cup Series team for 9 races. This car will feature Trump 2020. Patriots of America is not affiliated with the Trump re-election campaign. Neither is the Trump campaign. A political action committee is an independent group that is self-funded and conveys a political message without collaborating with a political party or campaign. So, Joe, today, as soon as that was announced, we've seen a lot of people take to Twitter and other social media platforms to give their thoughts about this car. They're either strongly in favor of it, or the side of that new sponsorship makes them pretty angry. So, what were your initial thoughts when you saw this car?
Definitely, my initial thought was this political action committee definitely wanted to have a presence and get the media attention. And definitely safe to say they've done that. I know had they gone with just their political action committee name of Patriots of America, a Patriots of America car, it wouldn't generate that much attention. Maybe if somebody was to Google it, see that they are a political action committee that are more for the kind of voters that would support Trump. With that said, they definitely got the media attention. I know everybody's been talking about it. Everybody has been very vocal whether they're pro or against it. And just one of those things where for a sponsor, especially a political action committee, it's an effective way to get their message across of who they support for president. And people are probably going to, be looking at their political action committee, and a lot more exposure now for the 32 car today.
Yeah, and one focus they said is registering voters is a big initiative. Corey LaJoie even stated himself in the press release that he'll, I quote, give his best effort to get NASCAR fans registered to vote. How do you think the political action committees handle voter registration, and can anybody on any side of the political spectrum vote?
Well, definitely when it comes to a political action committee doing voter registration, it's no different than a political party, political groups, even subgroups, or an individual who's a registered voter registrar from registering voters. So anybody from the political spectrum could go. So if there was a 32 car with this Trump paint scheme and somebody wanted to go and register to vote, the staff manning the voter register booth, they can't tell a person how to register to vote. They can't tell a person, oh, you can't register to vote because you have this. So essentially, it is in a way something where we know this car got a lot of fans' attention. So it could definitely bring out people that they want to see register to vote, and then people that is come out to vote and register, but probably against their message. So it's really interesting move to see that essentially they went with this route to get more attention.
Yeah, and NASCAR has a history of letting political campaign cars for presidential candidates in the past, and most of the time they go for smaller teams, like in 1996 with Dolan Kemp, and then Rick Santorum with Front Row in 2012, and President Trump in 2016 and 2020. So, and I understand that a lot of people have various opinions on political sponsorship in NASCAR. Do you think that NASCAR needs to reconsider allowing sponsorship who are representing political candidates?
Possibly. I mean, this year, especially with everything going on, this isn't just like in 1996 where you have Bob Dole, Jack Kemp, they were running for president. They sponsored a car at Darlington, I believe, in 1996. They're in the back of the pack, and we didn't see a whole lot of them. And I believe it was just a one race deal. Same with Rick Santorum. This pack has essentially an 8 race deal with everything going on, I think this is a good opportunity not only for NASCAR to just look at political sponsorships, but maybe other sponsorships as well. 2017, Carl Long showed up at Kansas Speedway with a car sponsored by a Colorado-based marijuana company. Now, Colorado does allow commercial use of marijuana, so does other states. But NASCAR said, we don't approve of this sponsor, Carl. You got to remove the decals in order to race in Kansas, and he did. So this is an opportunity, I think, for NASCAR to look at not only political campaign sponsors, but other sponsors that in the future might present such a question for NASCAR.
Oh, yes, definitely. I absolutely agree with everything you said. And also, when looking at the sponsor, when you look at the sponsorship from this political action committee, you also have to think about the business side with Go Fast Racing because because they're going to be sponsoring Go Fast Racing for 9 races in all. And from speaking from a business perspective, when you're having a sponsor come on and you don't have a sponsor for those races and they're going to be paying out a good amount of money for a small team. That's almost it's almost a deal that you cannot refuse, because if you refuse it and then you're unable to find a sponsor for those 9 races, then your program is going to be in trouble. And Go Fast Racing is one of the smaller teams in the NASCAR Cup Series garage. So so understand that people may feel one way or the other about this certain paint scheme, and but also at the end of the day, people also need to realize that Go Fast Racing is not only just a race team. It's a business. And 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 when you're one of the smaller teams and you need funding, sometimes you have to take the funding where you can get it. And when talking about reconsidering political sponsorship, in 2018, the F the F Santino Ferrucci, when he was racing in Formula 2, he wanted to run a Make America Great Again paint scheme, but the FIA would not let it happen because they have a policy against allowing sponsorship that has something to do with politics. And I don't know if that's a route NASCAR is going to take in the future, but I know that the FIA has no tolerance for that whatsoever. And Santino Ferrucci was denied the Make America Great Again sponsorship because the FIA doesn't want anything to do with politics in their form of motor racing. And this weekend's Brickyard 400 will be the first race out of 9 for Go Fast Racing's Trump 2020 sponsorship.
And speaking about Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Friday it was announced that the Indianapolis 500 scheduled for August 23rd will allow fans at the track up to 50% of the capacity at the speedway. Now, this comes after Roger Penske, the new owner of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, essentially said the Indianapolis 500 will run with or without the fans. Now we have this news: 50% capacity. Ticket holders will be informed if they have the tickets already for this year's Indy 500. However, depending on how they go with that route, they also said right now there is no refund option yet made available. Doesn't mean there's not going to be one, but they're still looking at how to determine who could attend the speedway since it's only going to be 50% capacity. Kobe, I don't know about you, but for me, it seems real risky to host an event because even though Indianapolis Motor Speedway is going to be half capacity, that's still over 150,000 people, the largest event since this pandemic has started. What kind of challenges is Indianapolis Motor Speedway facing?
Oh, it's definitely gonna be a lot of challenges because that this current pandemic in the United States, it's really taken off in a really negative way. And as you see, in Iowa, they canceled the Knoxville National Sprint Car Race, and also they also canceled another major event at Eldora Speedway as well, because of the pandemic. And it makes me wonder, are we gonna see more cancellations? And there won't be an Indy 500 if they can't run with fans, and allowing that number of fans. I don't. I mean, it's great that we want to get fans back to the track and all, but that number of fans, and considering that most virus case numbers are going way up all across the United States at the moment, I don't really know how we can possibly have fans at the track. I understand, it's big enough where you can have them socially distanced all around, and I understand that I understand that this is a touchy subject and all, but I don't think that we can really have fans in the stands unless you're going to be enforcing the wearing a mask, because it's proven that that wearing a mask can help prevent the spread of the virus, and we definitely want to have all the fans safe at the racetrack so they don't have to worry about their health. Just just with the just with the current number of people that they're planning to have at the Indianapolis 500, I'm just not really sure if it's going to be safe enough for them.
Yeah, it's gonna be really something else to see. I think they're definitely gonna be looking at what happens at Bristol. Bristol, they said 30,000 fans are gonna attend. Of course, the question is, will fans be wanting to attend with everything going on as case numbers are increasing and seeing how NASCAR handles everything at Bristol? That's going to be a test. So I think that's going to be essentially Indianapolis Motor Speedway plan. The 50%, yeah, you could spread them out because it is such a huge facility that could fit over 300,000. But still, it's going to be really something to enforce the social distancing. Of course, this is a long ways from now, August 23rd. We still don't know what's going to happen within the United States as well, if there are any changes with this pandemic and the course of it. Now, one question this has brought up is the local blackout rules. For those not familiar, the blackout rule is essentially to encourage fans to attend the Indianapolis 500. The Indy 500 will not be shown on television within the immediate area. Since there's only going to be 150,000, half the capacity, should they reconsider having this blackout rule in case we don't have a sellout of the half capacity, or even if we have half the capacity? Should we still have this blackout rule?
In my opinion, I think the blackout rules should be lifted, because this is a special, unique situation, and I understand some fans won't want, although they will be able to, like you mentioned, they will be able to spread out and socially distance in the stands, because India is so big. But some fans out there, they won't want to take the risk, and they might choose to sit this year out and come back next year. And if they're living in the state of Indiana, and they're want to see the race, it's not fair to them at all that they won't be able to see it. So I think under these special circumstances that the blackout rules should be lifted, so other individuals who are affected by this can be able to watch the Indianapolis 500 if we have one this year.
Definitely, in case we have one, that is the big question. Still a lot of time for things to happen. I know Roger has been talking about getting the fans. I guess the big question, if for some reason the Indy 500 does not happen this year, how devastating would it be for the industry as a whole to not have the Indianapolis 500?
Oh, it would be absolutely devastating. The Indianapolis 500 is the biggest race on the entire schedule. If not one of the biggest races in the world, it's the greatest spectacle in racing. And not having that event on the calendar, that would be truly devastating for all the teams in the NTT IndyCar series, because the payout for that race is obviously the largest on schedule, and and basically the entire series revolves around this one event, and not having it this year, it could definitely have a major financial impact to all the race teams.
Now, one of the impacts it's going to have this weekend to all the race teams is it's going to be very busy. We got the Indy cars, they're running Saturday morning. The Xfinity Series, they're running the road course this weekend. And then, of course, the NASCAR Cup Series, Brickyard 400 Sunday. Definitely would encourage everyone to be sure to tune in to Grid Live pre-race Saturday morning before all the action. And of course, another piece of interesting news recently announced, seven-time NASCAR Cup Series champion Jimmy Johnson is going to be receiving the opportunity to drive an Indy car for Chip Ganassi Racing at Indianapolis Speedway Road Course. Now, initially, we know it was going to be with Arrow McLaren Racing prior to the pandemic over at Skip Barber in Alabama. Now he gets to go with Chip Ganassi for this test. Were you shocked to hear the news that Johnson would be testing with Ganassi instead of McLaren?
Oh yeah, it was definitely shocking to see Jimmy Johnson is going to be testing for Chip Ganassi Racing, because I just assumed that Arrow McLaren SP was just rescheduled. When Jimmy Johnson did the car swap with Fernando Alonso at Bahrain, Jimmy got to talking with the McLaren group and Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren Racing, and and they came up with a plan to get Jimmy Johnson some seat time in the IndyCar at Barber, but then the pandemic struck, and then those plans had to be scrapped. I thought Jimmy would eventually get that IndyCar test with McLaren, and it just kind of surprised me that it's with Chip Ganassi racing. I mean, if Jimmy Johnson's tested him with Chip Ganassi racing, I'm thinking, is this just a respect thing, or is there more to it? Could Jimmy Johnson really have another option besides McLaren if he chooses to race an IndyCar part time next year? And since Jimmy said that he's retiring as a full time NASCAR Cup driver, if Jimmy goes with Ganassi next year, could that mean we could still see him in the NASCAR Cup Series next year in an open car from Chip Ganassi Racing? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure as time moves on, we'll definitely have the answers to those questions.
Definitely, it's going to be a lot of questions. One of the things I started thinking about as well, we've seen in the past where a driver will retire or even a crew chief will retire but then join another team as sort of competition director or development director of some sort, and it just started to make me think. Chip Ganassi, of course, they only had a two-car team in the NASCAR Cup Series. If they want to expand, make it where they are a bigger threat to win every week, having Jimmy Johnson after he retires could be a big benefit. And then, of course, offering the opportunity to do some IndyCar racing. So definitely it's going to be really interesting to see all what happens in the future.
Yeah, definitely interested indeed. And with the NASCAR Cup Series heading to Indianapolis this weekend, they're coming off the heel of a Pocono doubleheader weekend. The doubleheader weekend saw weather that postponed the NASCAR Gander RV and Outdoor Truck Series race from Saturday to Sunday morning, and then Saturday's Cup race saw Eric Almirola take the pole and lead most of the race. The short race distance allowed the teams to try out multiple strategies, which at the end helped Kevin Harvick earn the win. What do you think of the short race with the shorter stages?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really great. We saw from what happened at the Coca Cola 600, where each stage was 100 laps. Almost all the teams took the same route of splitting the stage in half with a pit stop and then stopping at the stage break. Here, we saw all sorts of strategy. We saw teams pit before the final two laps of each stage. We saw some teams went in during the pit stops during the stage breaks, but then we saw some teams not make a pit stop at all during the stage break and kept going. So it was really fascinating to see all the different strategies out there from all the teams. It came down to fuel mileage, where I was convinced we were going to see somebody run out of fuel at some point, but it made it for a very entertaining race, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, and one of the most notable moments from this race was a big crash that occurred between Tyler Reddick and Eric Jones on Saturday. What did you think about the crash, and was there anything that Tyler Reddick could have done differently, or is it just one of those racing incidents?
Definitely, it was one of those racing incidents. It looks like Eric Jones, as he was coming out, got loose. We don't know if he was going to slide all the way towards the wall or maybe save it. But as Tyler Reddick was coming up, as Eric Jones got into that slide and came down, the two of them made significant contact, went into that inside wall, hard hit for both of them. And really, it was sort of like what I call it one of those first race weekends where Tyler Reddick got involved in a crash and was just simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. Quite often, we see, especially rookies, their first year racing, they put themselves in a situation where if another driver has an issue and they're there, they usually get caught up in the trouble. But it was just, I feel, a racing incident.
Yeah, and surprisingly, not a single Chevrolet driver led a lap on Saturday, but that changed on Sunday when Kurt Busch led every lap in stage one, and that didn't last long as Ryan Blaney took the lead in stage two. In stage two, we saw multiple cautions, including a big moment when Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney got together when approaching slower lap traffic in the tunnel turn, and later on, NASCAR showed a replay on their social media pages after Fox didn't really get a good replay, and then luckily there was a camera working in that area, and we later got to see what happened. So Joe, my question to you, after seeing this replay, do you think that was just bad luck, or was it somebody's fault?
Seems like bad luck. I know a lot of times when we have incidents like this, people tend to blame the lap driver for being in the way of the leader. We've seen this happen before. I recall one year in Darlington where a lap down car put Jeff Gordon in the wall entering turn number one. So this is something where it always gets people talking about, who's in the right, who's in the wrong. This was in the tunnel turn. The tunnel turn is very tricky for all drivers, including the experienced drivers. They put down that PJ1, but still we saw that lower line was preferred line, even though we did see a couple cars use the high line to get around. So at the end, I just feel this was just a situation where the leader caught up on traffic, misjudged, had to let off the gas. Then we see Blaney really didn't have the opportunity to let off as quickly, make the contact with Kyle Busch, and end Kyle Busch's day.
Yeah, and due to this incident, Kyle Busch retired from the race, and Ryan Blaney wasn't a factor at all. But fuel mileage was a major factor, and Denny Hamlin earned his fourth win of the season, and Kevin Harvick was second in this one, and the long day at Pocono came to an end. So overall, what do you think of Pocono hosting two Cup races?
Overall, I thought Pocono did a great job hosting both Cup races. We know we was going to be doing this prior to the pandemic, so this was part of the original plan. Teams had chance to prepare and then inadvertently had opportunities to practice, even though it was just a couple of days in between with the Darlington and the Charlotte race. Still, it was really cool to see some of the pictures too of the teams working on the cars overnight, including the ones that had to remove one wrap and put in another wrap for the other sponsor. So overall, I feel it was a really good weekend in Pocono. I'll be really interested to see if NASCAR decides to go with it again at Pocono.
Yeah, and because of the rain that occurred, we had a triple header on Sunday. It was the NASCAR Truck Race, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series. So, do you think NASCAR should consider a triple header weekend in the future?
I think they should. It's just a matter of what kind of track, which one they'll do. If I was NASCAR, I'd be looking at a racetrack that has the space. They might have to figure out a plan for accommodating all the teams, especially in the garage area, the holler area, but definitely look at a track that has one race day, maybe a Chicagoland or Atlanta Motor Speedway. Because especially with those tracks that only have one race day, this could generate more excitement for fans to come out and support their track.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, for me, I think a triple header is definitely a great idea. And this time around, it was under some unique circumstances. The event ran behind closed doors. But my question is, would race fans really be willing to sit out in the heat all day long and watch three consecutive races in a row? Especially, at some place, you mentioned Chicagoland. I remember people like sitting out in the Chicago summer heat. They were like roasting, and they needed fluids immediately because it was just so hot out there. And I think Chicagoland would definitely be an interesting one. Also worry about the summertime heat. Like do people really want to sit out from, let's say, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning all the way till the evening time? Because it might just be too hot. Maybe try out the triple header. It when maybe like in the early spring or fall time, when it's going to be cooler outside, and maybe a track with lights would be best for a triple header. But I definitely like the idea of a triple header. I understand that some people are really don't like the late start times for the cup race, like the 3:30 time. And if you have a triple header, I think you could really get away with that because you would have racing on from morning, and going into the late evening. And Joe, everything that happened at Pocono and Sydney Motorsport Park this weekend. What did it do to the grid ranking in the WML?
Well, definitely it had a very big impact for both stands. Taking a look at just the WML stands right now, Scott McLaughlin retook the lead because he has completed the 5 races minimum for the WML. So Scott McLaughlin and Jamie Whincup took the top 2 spots. The other supercar racer in the top 10, Chas Monster in 6th place. Then we have all the NASCAR drivers with Chase Briscoe taking 3rd place. He earned a win. Denny Hamlin, another winner. Harrison Burton, 5th place, despite falling down lately with some bad luck. Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Noah Gragson, and AJ Allmendinger. Really surprised to see him in the mix as well for the Grid WML. Now, for all our fans, you can follow the World Motor League on our Twitter, grid_WML. As for the grid ranking again saw Scott McLaughlin extend his lead. This is a record. He has now led the grid ranking for 40 weeks total. Of course, he has the record of 32 straight weeks last year, losing it to Mark Marquez for the championship. But then he's been leading it every week. This is the 8th active week of the grid ranking, so 40 weeks leading. That is a big accomplishment. But look at second place, Denny Hamlin. He has been really good. He got wins already. He's looking really strong this year, potentially a championship. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Denny Hamlin does. Of course, Jamie Whincup, Sebastian Ogier, Kevin Harvick rounds out the top 5, and then your top 6 through 10, essentially the same. Antonio Felix da Costa from Formula E, Alfin Evans, Mitch Evans, Ryan Briscoe, and Chase Elliott moves into the top 10 after being out of the top 10 for a while. Now, one of the things, of course, this weekend is going to be really interesting to see. We're going to have Indy cars racing. That will be the second race for the IndyCar Series. So then they'll be part of the grid ranking. Formula One is their first race weekend. So they still have one more race weekend to compete in order to get into the grid ranking. But that leads us to our next story, and that was the comments made by Bernie Eclestone last Friday. Bernie was being interviewed for television, and while discussing about a little bit about Lewis Hamilton and the response, especially to Black Lives Matter and all the unrest in the United States, he made the statement that black people are more racist than white people. F1 responded by saying that Bernie has no role in Formula One, that his views does not reflect what Formula One stands for. Lewis Hamilton commented saying that he was disappointed in Bernie's comment and he's of a different generation. Bernie then replied that he is not a racist, citing examples such as giving Willie T. Ribs a ride in F1 and other examples. What are your thoughts on Bernie's comments that he made Friday?
Read the room, Bernie. Read the room. It was just very disappointing, but I can't say that I'm surprised at all to hear those comments from Bernie Eclestone because, as you know, a lot of people are obviously entitled to feel however they choose, but but there's some things that I feel that should be kept to yourselves, and it was that, and I definitely think that Bernie's comments are definitely tone deaf, and it just shows me that he really doesn't get what's going on. And Bernie, I believe I believe he's 89 years old right now, about to turn 90. And Bernie is old school, and his comments just reflect on the like the like previous generations and all of that. And Bernie, almost turning 90 years old, so he's just stuck in his ways. And I don't. And some people, once you like had like a certain ideology, like beaten into your skull for like so many years and years, decades and decades, that's pretty much who you that's pretty much what they're gonna believe, and there's nothing you can do to change it. But yeah, it was definitely disappointing to hear him make those comments.
Definitely it was. It's sort of reminded me of a situation where we're seeing where he said what he said, essentially stereotyping African Americans, and then saying, "Oh, but I've done this for Willie T. Reeves. I've done this. I'm not racist." But the thing that Lewis Hamilton really pointed out was saying he's of a different generation. He hasn't done anything to try to make it more equitable in Formula One. Yeah, he may have given Willie T. Reeves an opportunity, but Lewis Hamilton cited how he was being harassed by some fans. And then even lately, we've been seeing some of the images from past races where there had been fans taunting Lewis Hamilton and they were using his race. So it's definitely was, I think you hit around the head of a different generation. He's in his 90s right now. And it was just something where I do think Formula One did the right thing in responding, saying we don't condone it. Lewis Hamilton responded very well to it. And I think overall, people are disappointed, including ourselves, in what Bernie said. Now, besides Bernie, of course, there was an incident involving a local racetrack here in the United States that made national news. 311 Speedway in North Carolina, the owner, Mike Fulp, received significant backlash from all over the country, essentially, about posts regarding Bubba Wallace. It first started with the sale of a Bubba Wallace rope, which was in the form of a noose for $9.99. Many people did not consider it a joke. Kobe, how did it make you feel when you heard about Phelps' post?
I'm gonna be honest. It really made me angry because there's no place for that in society. And I'll tell you this right now: if one of my friends tried to, make a joke about that and come up with like a Kobe rope or something like that, I'll tell you that they would no longer be my friend ever again. I don't care if you were trying to joke. That there's some things you joke about and some things you don't, and that was definitely one of the things that you don't joke about at all because it's a serious matter. And I've had trolls in my mentions since the Bubba Wallace news story came out and all of that. And the other day, I don't really engage in any of the trolls. I just let them talk to themselves and have their fun or whatever. And a lady in my mentions who were one of the angry trolls, she posted in my mention that there's something called a Bubba rope, so I should stop taking that seriously. And actually, I didn't believe her at first, so I actually went to Google and I typed in and I typed in Bubba rope and believe it and you believe it or not, there's actually a rope called a Bubba rope, but you know what? Mike Falk knew exactly what he was doing. While it might be called a Bubba rope, we all know what Mike Falk was referring to, and that's totally uncalled for. And and looking at and then I saw some other troubling comments on his Facebook page, and I was just shaking my head. I'm like, man, like how in the world are you owning a racetrack? A business owner, and you're making these kind of comments. And 311 Speedway is actually a local track. It's like to the west of my house in the next county over. So if I wanted to go to 311 Speedway on a Friday or a Saturday night, I could actually go. But you know what? I have no interest in going to 311 Speedway right now because based on his comments and everything, it made me feel like that people like me are not welcome to the racetrack.
Definitely, they were very unwelcoming comments and very disturbing. I know when I saw it, I too was just offended. And the response he has gotten, of course, was he lost all but two of his sponsors. He received death threats. Members of his family were threatened as well. And a sprint car series pulled their date from 311 Speedway. And several of his track employees actually quit as well. In addition to his other racist posts that were all found on Facebook, he has since then deleted them. Now, Fulp claiming that he isn't a racist, explains that he was only trying to make a joke, which others interpreted as racist comments. Do you think his claims are legitimate?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to say that death threats are not acceptable at all, no matter what they did. And if you're one of those people who are sending him death threats, I want you to reconsider what you're doing because that's not cool at all. I don't care all the nasty stuff that he did. You don't send people death threats at all, and also threatening members of his family that did nothing wrong, had nothing to do with this as well. That's something you just don't do. Do not drag them into this at all. But and while I don't know Mike Fulp as a person, so I don't have any right to call him racist or not because I don't know him. But considering everything that's going on at 311 Speedway and also his troubling posts on Facebook, it's pretty easy to understand why some people might consider him a racist.
Definitely. It's something where online, it's always typing, whether it is email, Facebook post. It's the hardest way to convey a message, whether it's just a joke or legitimately hateful. It definitely came out in a hateful manner. He said he's apologized. He's trying to change his ways to say, but for me, definitely, especially I don't know him. I'm pretty far away from 311 Speedway. His actions going forward are going to speak much more louder. Is he really remorseful? Is he really going to show change? How is he going to handle everything? So that's something I think is going to be really interesting to see how he deals with everything going forward, and then answering the questions people have about his apology.
Yeah, yeah, Joe, you're absolutely right. Actions do speak louder than words. Hopefully, some good will come out of this incident, and Mike Fulp will realize, that whatever you say and do, although you have the freedom of speech, there will be consequences. And my hope is that he'll learn from this, then that that he'll look in the mirror and try to change his heart and see that some of the things that he was saying on social media that is very hurtful to some people, and if he wants to recover from all of the losses that he suffered from his own actions, he's definitely gonna have to work hard in order to change his ways. And now now transitioning back to Formula One stuff. With Formula One beginning their season this weekend in Austria, Mercedes revealed that they would be sporting a special black livery this year to highlight their strong stance against racism and discrimination while striving to be a part of the change to create more diversity in the sport. And this should, make Lewis Hamilton feel good knowing that his team has his back and stands with him during these challenging times. Would you agree, Joe?
Definitely, I would agree. I think it's been really powerful to see when Lewis Hamilton, being the first F1 driver to comment about what happened to George Floyd, he rallied the other drivers to speak up against racism as well. Mercedes has been strong with him, and I think this really shows that Mercedes are truly behind Lewis Hamilton. A lot of times, I think people, when they hear, oh, yeah, we're behind our driver, they're behind the spirit. This is Mercedes taking action like, okay, for the record books, for the history books, our livery is going to be a black car. And when people are going to ask, why was there a black Mercedes in 2020? There's a story behind that black Mercedes. And I think that's really powerful for everybody to tell in the future when they say, I remember seeing that Mercedes in 2020.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a powerful move by Mercedes to be running a black paint scheme for Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas this year. I'm sure it's definitely a sight that will remember for a long time in Formula One, just like the Bubba Wallace Black Lives Matter car that ran at Martinsville Speedway a few weeks ago. And while we're discussing Lewis Hamilton, do you think he's an automatic favorite to win the championship this year?
He's definitely one of the favorites to win the championship. I know when it comes to this year, it's really interesting because Ferrari has said their car is not the greatest this year. So a lot of questions how competitive it will be. Red Bull will be then the next one. Max Verstappen, if he has a good car, he could definitely be competing for wins. Alex Albon, this is going to be his first full season with Red Bull. So he's going to have a little bit of learning curve, but there'll be some expectation from him to be on that podium every once in a while. So that really leaves Valtteri Bottas, his teammate, who's going to try to compete. But I think Lewis Hamilton is really looking strong. And then, of course, we have the same car next year due to the freeze. There'll be minor adjustments here and there. And then, depending on how they finish in the standings, the last place team will have a lot more aerodynamic time compared to the championship team. So I definitely think this is a strong year for Lewis Hamilton to get his championship and tie essentially Michael Schumacher.
Yeah, as you just mentioned, if Lewis Hamilton wins the world championship this year in Formula One, he would tie Michael Schumacher. And speaking of Michael, his son Mick Schumacher will begin his second season of Formula Two racing in Austria with Prima. Last year, he only won a single sprint race in Hungary and finished 12th in the championship standings. Do you expect to see improvement this season from Mick Schumacher?
Definitely. This is his second season racing Formula 2. Last year, being a rookie, learning all the ins and outs of the cars, the tracks, the challenges, learning that communication skill with the engineers. There's definitely going to be a lot of pressure on him, I think, this year, especially to win races, to improve. Because besides, any driver in this situation, Formula 2, you are being looked at as the next F1 driver. For him, especially, I think that pressure is definitely there and present for him.
Oh yeah, definitely a lot of pressure on Mick Schumacher, as you mentioned, and also, just carrying the Schumacher name. That's enough pressure yourself. You saw it, with Dale Earnhardt Jr. and then his father, Dale Earnhardt Sr. When you're the son of Michael Schumacher, one of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time, there's definitely going to be a lot of pressure. And so far, Mick has handled the pressure really well. And second season of Formula Two racing, he's probably expected to be one of the championship contenders, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year. And he's actually been rumored for a future F1 seat with Alfa Romeo Racing being a possibility down the road, given the certainty. Kimi Räikkönen is getting up there in age. and Antonio Giovinazzi did not get the promotion to Ferrari when they went out and signed Carlos Sainz and Sebastian Vettel is going to be departing the team. So if Mick Schumacher fails to perform this year, let's say that it's just an awful year in Formula Two, do you think this would have an impact on his F1 hopes?
Definitely, I think it will have some sort of an impact. If he's out there winning races and commanding the championship, he's going to be in that Alfa Romeo seat. If he's still up there, a couple wins here and there, he'll still be at the F1 seat. But if it's another year of just, not performing, not meeting up expectations, you're going to see teams then start to, really look at him critically, try to figure out, okay, where does he fit in our plans in F1? So it's definitely going to be one of the things, as you mentioned, just like how when Dale Earnhardt Jr. started his stock car career, a lot of pressure, lots of eyes watching him, a lot of pressure, lots of eyes watching Mick Schumacher this year.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Mick Schumacher, there's definitely going to be pressure on him, and I understand he didn't have the season that he probably hoped for last year in Formula Two, but when I was looking over some of Mick Schumacher's stats and in the certain categories that he competed in years prior, in some of them he actually struggled a little bit in year one, and then completely turned up the wick in year two. So maybe he just needs to get a year of experience under his belt that he already has now in F2, and then maybe he'll take what he learned last year in his rookie campaign, so his sophomore campaign will be stronger than ever, so he can move on to Formula One and walk in the footsteps of his legendary father, Michael Schumacher.
Yes, it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Of course, we got Formula One this weekend, IndyCar, and NASCAR this weekend. Is definitely going to be a star-studded weekend of racing.
Yeah, and speaking of star-studded, the NASCAR All-Star Race will introduce the choose cone rule at Bristol Motor Speedway. So for the fans who are not familiar with the choose cone rule, can you tell us how it works, Joe?
Yeah, so the choose cone rule essentially eliminates the disadvantage of restarting in the less preferred lane. So traditionally, NASCAR, we've seen, especially in Darlington, Bristol, there's a preferred restart lane and a less preferred one. The lead car usually will start in the preferred lane that they want, usually the inside or the outside lane. So second place will then be in the less desirable lane. They take the green flag, the lead car will get going. The second place car will have trouble, usually tire spin, less rubber on that groove, less grip. So everyone on the outside groove, whereas third place, fourth place on back, gets around. With this choose cone rule, essentially when they get the one to go, drivers will select which lanes they want to be in. So if the leader selects the lane that they preferred lane, the second place car could elect the same lane, staying behind the leader. Third place has the same option, but if, say, fourth place or fifth place decides, hey, I want to take a chance and go into the inside lane, that'll take them to the front row if they're the first car. So if you're fifth place and nobody has selected that lane that nobody wants, you can move into that lane and be restarting side by side with the leader. And then other drivers will do the same too. So it definitely gives the drivers the opportunity to either stay in the safe lane or try to take advantage of the situation and move up and make a gamble for a better position.
And so overall, how do you think this rule change will affect the overall format of the All-Star race?
It's definitely going to make it really interesting. We saw Bristol how that outside lane was the preferred lane on the restarts, especially once that PJ1 got really active going on. That middle lane seemed to be better for the drivers into the corners. I wouldn't be surprised to see the first four cars stay in that preferred lane when it comes to the restart. But definitely, I'll be keeping an eye on fifth place, sixth place on back. If they see, hey, nobody has taken that inside lane, they're going to move up front. If you're running seventh place and you feel bold enough to move into the inside lane that nobody else has, if you only lose 2 or 3 spots in that restart, you still have a net gain from seventh up to third or fourth, depending on where it goes. So it's going to be really interesting to see, especially in the open races as people are trying to race into the All Star race.
Yeah, so if the choose cone rule is a success at the All-Star race at Bristol, do you think NASCAR might consider introducing this rule full time in 2021?
I think so. We've seen how with the introduction of the Winston, the old All-Star race name, we had double file restarts, and that was the one event that only had double file restarts. Now we have double file restarts at every race because people kept calling for this change to emulate what we had at the Winston. If this rule works out really well, where we do see a lot of strategy, a lot more moves to try to gain positions, the fans are going to respond well. NASCAR is going to like to see what the fans are happy, and if the teams overall think it's a good move, I see them implementing it in 2021. The one thing NASCAR does have to consider is making sure they do it effectively. We don't want 2 or 3 laps running just trying to sort the cars. If we have cars taking the wave around, lap down cars, we don't want to take away laps from the race. So it'll be something where NASCAR will be really looking at to see what happens for 2021.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think if all goes well, we could definitely see the choose cone rule, here to stay in 2021 and beyond. Yeah, like you mentioned, NASCAR's gonna have to be able to do this effectively and make sure that we're not wasting laps. I believe well, within the past 5 years, we wasted a ton of laps at a race at Martinsville trying to figure out the running order. And I remember and I remember a lot of people were very frustrated. I forgot how long it took, but it took way longer than it needed to take, and that was just figuring out the running order. And if you're gonna have a lot of trouble figuring out, just a running order and just a regular race. And you definitely don't want to waste laps of the choose cone. And, in the short track racing community, they've been able to, implement the choose cone and do really well with it without any major issues. And I do think that NASCAR is going to do well with this. There might be a few issues here and there, trying to get it all figured out. But I think in the end that the choose cone is definitely going to play a major factor at certain tracks we go to.
Yeah, this is going to play a major factor, especially the ones where we see a disadvantage lane. Definitely will be sure to catch us Saturday morning before the race. We're going to have Grid Live on the air Saturday 11:30 a.m. On the East Coast. We'll be covering the previews for the IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR race, and pick a winner, which I got to catch up. Kobe has a pretty significant lead on that. We got the GMR Grand Prix for IndyCars on NBC at 12 noon Eastern. Then 6 a.m., perfect time for breakfast on ESPN2, the Austrian Grand Prix for Formula One. And then NASCAR, the Brickyard 400, Big Machine Hand Sanitizer 400, 4 p.m. on NBC. So definitely big day of racing going on Saturday and Sunday. You can watch Grid Live on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube, and also our LinkedIn channel. We do have a LinkedIn page. Just type in Global Racing Index Database on LinkedIn. For Kobe Lambeth at the podium finish, I'm Joe Samniego. Thank you for watching. We'll see you Saturday morning.